Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh and salam sejahtera. Okay, the objective of this video is to do reflection on the chapter 3, IT Architecture. So basically, I will touch only a few areas in this chapter, which I consider important for you to understand and you can relate with your working life in your future. Okay. Okay, as you know, this course consists of 4 major parts, which are strategy, architecture, payoffs, and governance. So for chapter 1 and 2, you have learned about IT synchronizing and information, right? Okay, which is under strategy, part 1. And for the part 2, architecture, you have learned about chapter 3, IT architecture. So in this part, we will do a reflection on the IT assets in IT portfolios. Okay, it's about how they've been set up in a company, right? So basically, our architecture means design. So when we talk about IT architecture, it is something that relate to IT design. Okay. Okay, IT architecture is a blueprint of the IT assets in a corporate IT portfolio that describes what they do, how they interact, and how they fit together. Okay, so in the big picture, an enterprise IT architecture describes the firm-wide organizing logic of the 3 classes of IT assets, which cover IT infrastructure, data, and apps. So a combination of all these 3 components, we call it enterprise IT architecture. Okay, so this diagram shows that 3 components basically are interrelated. Okay, you see, IT infrastructure constrains apps, okay, architecture, and which in turn shapes how a firm's data assets are organized. Okay. Now we recap. There are 2 things for you to remember. The first one is IT architecture is a blueprint of IT assets in your IT portfolio, describing what they do and how they interact. The second one is enterprise IT architecture is how your corporate IT apps, IT infrastructure, and data are organized. All right. So that's our view of corporate IT architecture. Okay, we start with the first layer, IT infrastructure architecture. IT infrastructure architecture is basically about your company's digital plumbing. Okay, meaning that it is your firm-wide foundation of shared IT assets and IT services used by all other units, departments, or line function in your company. Okay, so IT infrastructure will include the networks through which data travels and apps are linked, and the hardware on which apps run and store data. Okay, a common IT hardware, for example, are PC, tablets, servers, and storage devices. Okay, you have to take note whenever you think about IT infrastructure, you should also think about network and the hardware. All right. Okay. Since IT infrastructure is your firm-wide arrangement, it is must always remains stable relative to apps. Okay. And IT infrastructure is mostly a generic commodity and is rarely a competitive differentiator. Usually, IT infrastructure consumes over 50% of corporate IT budgets. Therefore, the IT infrastructure must be reliable but economical. So the key choice is level of centralization. Okay, about the key architecture choice, it is basically about how much to decentralize IT infrastructure or how much to centralize it, as shown in this diagram. which illustrates the trade-off between centralizing and decentralizing IT infrastructure. Okay, generally, more centralized architecture uh, cost, are costlier to build but cheaper to run than more decentralized ones. Okay, I think as a non-IT staff, you should contribute in establishing the IT infrastructure. And the two things that you have to bear in your mind, which number one, you should know whether fragility or tailoring is more important for your unit. Okay, and the second one, you must define what is good enough for your operational performance. All right, I think that's all about the first layer. Okay, now we move to the second layer of IT architecture, which is app architecture. Apps basically are software programs that support the functionality of hardware devices such as a PC, laptop, smartphone, tablet, and etc. Okay, as you can see in this diagram, all these hardware devices are called client. They are used to access a resource or service placed on a more powerful central computer called server. Alright. Okay, basically, server is a machine that can serve many user devices which connect to it through internet. Okay. Okay, now we look at the architecture of apps. Okay. Um, Actually, any apps consist of three building blocks of functionality as shown in this diagram: interaction, apps logic, and data storage. So basically, you can place these three building blocks either centrally, which is in server, or uh, individually, uh, user device, which is clients. Okay, their placement, whether on the left or on the right, this is what we call the apps architecture. Okay, basically, an apps architecture is simply how you choose to divide these three pieces between a centralized server and user device. Okay, and you have to bear in your mind that once you made your choice of arrangement of the apps architecture, operationally, it is not reversible and it has strategic consequences. Okay, I think that's all for the second layer. Okay, this slide is about arrangements of apps architecture uh, that I mentioned in the previous slide. Okay, we have three arrangements of apps architecture, which are cloud architecture, client server architecture, and peer-to-peer architecture. Okay, in cloud architecture, basically we put all three pieces of building blocks in on a central server. Okay, and in the client server architecture, they locate interaction and apps logic building blocks in user devices, and it's centralized only a data storage. Okay, in the peer-to-peer architecture, they takes a stand-alone architecture. Okay, and then connects all user devices using the internet, which every user devices performs all apps function. Okay, there is no central server, which every user device simultaneously also acts as a little server for all other user devices. All right, I think that's about the arrangements of apps architecture. Okay, the last one is third layer of IT architecture, which is data architecture. Right, when we talk about data architecture, it is basically about how do you want to keep your company data, your operational data, and your strategy data, and where do you want to store those data. All right. Okay, this is the basic understanding about data architecture, right? So I hope everyone clear about this concept. Okay, integrated firm-wide data is the foundation for automating of business processes and analytics. However, the prevalent problem in firms is proliferation of duplicated and inconsistent data. In other words, duplication and inconsistency of data is keep on growing. Okay, so in order to solve it, you have to find the cause of problem. There are two causes, right? The first one is the fragmentation of data across apps. Okay, meaning that your business data from different IT apps are scattered across various line function in your company. Okay, the second one is um, the dispersion of data across a geographic location, meaning that your data is not centralized. Okay, the same apps located in different locations has its own data storage, right? Okay, both problems basically require different solution. Okay, the first solution is for fragmented data across apps. Is data warehouse. That's the solution. Okay, basically, the fragmented data from various line function in your company can be integrated and stored in a centralized repository. Okay, the second solution is for dispersed data across geographic location. Is either do replicating or partitioning as a solution. All right. So as a non-IT manager, for example, you can help answer two questions to help your IT colleagues to decide on the appropriate data architecture. Okay, the first one is uh, what data should be centralized for business process analytic, and the second one is what data must be shared across your markets. Okay, these are the two questions that you can help answer to help your IT colleagues. Right? Okay, I think that's all a reflection for chapter 3. I hope all of you will listen and watch my video carefully in order to get the explanation of each slide. Right? Okay, as summary, IT architecture translates between business speak and IT speak to foster a shared purpose. Okay, so enterprise architecture spans all three classes of IT assets in IT portfolio, which is number one is infrastructure architecture, which is about centralized or decentralized. Okay, which means centralizing can lower the cost, but decentralizing can help tailor it to diverse your business needs. Okay, the second one is apps architecture. It is about how the three building blocks of apps are split across the internet, right? Okay, the third one is data architecture. It is about how data is stored and to make it consistent and accessible. Okay, with that, with that summary, I end the reflection of IT architecture chapter. Okay, thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and salam sejahtera.